Welcome to the Lifestyle Evolution Podcast. I am Joshua Laycock. I would like to talk about something today that it comes up a lot. And almost, I don't know, pull a number out of the sky. 80% roughly of the guys that I work with, particularly in the men's groups that I'm a part of, and it has to do with the nature of our relationships, particularly intimate relationships with our spouses. And what I see so much of is men who come and talk to me about their challenges, and either they're on the back end of a divorce, they're going through a divorce, or they're worried about headed towards a divorce. And usually the story is my wife and I are like roommates. We're not lovers anymore. We're not excited to be around each other. We don't really talk very much. If we do, we're fighting. And there's this complete absence of connection. And it's miserable, right? And a lot of guys get stuck in this cycle. And this complete absence of connection leads to distance. And that's why I have to be honest, when a lot of guys find themselves where their wives want a divorce, a lot of guys feel really blindsided by this, which is like got to be the worst feeling. Like it's one thing to kind of know it's fallen apart, but the other is when you don't really see it coming. But one of the most common themes that I see consistently in the guys that I talk to in their relationship style, and it's not exclusive, and this is where I want to caveat. I'm going to speak generally about things that I've seen. I'm not talking about any specific clients of mine. It's not what I do. Also, this is not therapy. So I'm going to give some things that I see and some tips, but um, I'm not offering therapy. So one of the tactics to get through these challenges is time in couples therapy. And I'm going to be real honest and share you about my wife and I, our time in couples therapy and what that did for us. So with that out of the way, a lot of men, when they get into tough situations, tough conversations, rough waters with their wives, we withdraw. We disengage from the conversation. Oftentimes we walk away, we physically distance ourselves, and we kind of retreat inside of us. It's so common. In the therapy world, it's called an avoidant attachment style. There's a lot of reasons why someone might have an avoidant attachment style. It stems from the past. It stems from the way that our parents raised us. It stems from possibly some inconsistency, not knowing which type of parent is going to show up, the happy or the angry. It can stem from situations where we get rejected as a child. Maybe depending on how many siblings you have or the nature of your relationship with your parents, it's like I just don't feel heard. So you're like, what's the point? Look, there's 1,000 reasons where that might come from, and part of uncovering that and recognizing what's going on, that's kind of the work we do in individual therapy, is figuring out why we are the way we are, um, and shining light on those things helps us work through them. But we're not going to sit there today. I want to share this or I want to talk about this because I experienced that. And, while we were never in trouble as a couple, my wife and I were at a point for a while there where things weren't so hot. We were becoming roommates. We were experiencing an absence of connection. And there were things in our life that were stressing us out. And what's really interesting, and I say interesting looking back on it, it was miserable while we were going through it, is that when we would have a disagreement, often I wouldn't know what to say or what to do to try to help my wife go through what she was going through or how to connect us both to bring us together. I didn't know how to do that. And what I knew, because I'd done enough work, was that I can't just jump in and try to fix stuff. But I didn't know how to work through that. And here's another really interesting thing that I think has led to why I would withdraw whenever we would have a disagreement or conflict. I would withdraw. Is Here's the kicker. I grew up in a very loving and caring home. Doesn't really tick the box for difficult childhood. My mom and my stepfather were deeply in love and they had a wonderful relationship. It wasn't perfect. As adults now, we speak about it and we understand the challenges, but growing up, I saw signs of affection. He would come home with flowers all the time. They were, sometimes it drove me crazy, but they were really affectionate. They, squeeze each other's bum and give each other kisses all the time. And they would hug and hold hands. And I never saw conflict. I know that now because I realize, okay, part of for me, what I recognized was a quote unquote good relationship has no conflict. Of course, that's not true. And there's zero judgment from my parents growing up. They were just doing their thing. But in my mind, I kind of learned that a good, strong relationship has no conflict. So whenever we would get in a disagreement, my wife and I would pull back because in my mind, it was like good relationships have no conflict. Do whatever you can to avoid the conflict. And in my mind, because I used to be a catastrophizer, I can just take a small situation and blow it out of proportion. In my mind, it was like, we're having an argument. I'm going to say something and it's probably not going to be very good, not very wise, make the situation worse. This conflict is going to get out of control. We're going to get divorced. I'm going to be homeless, living under a bridge, and da 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 da. My life is over. So maybe just shut up. So I would shut up and I would withdraw. For me, it's books. I'd back off and I'd grab a book and I just wouldn't engage. And I think I wasn't very conscious of it at the time, but for me, it was a lot of good, dodge that fight. Good, keeping the peace, keeping everything okay. But I wouldn't articulate how I was feeling. I wouldn't articulate if I was hurt or what I was, or if I was scared. I wouldn't share that because that could only lead to conflict. So fast forward, we all did our work. My wife was seeing a therapist, and we came together as a couple, and we went and spoke to a couples therapist, and we were encouraged to share how we feel. And what was interesting is my wife, and I spoke to her, she's okay with me sharing this story. She came to me and said, part of what is really creating a wedge between us is that when we have a disagreement, it feels like our marriage isn't even important enough to you to fight for it. And that broke my heart because it could not have been further from the truth. But what she saw was that when things got tough, I just said, fuck it, and walked away. It looked like surrender. It looked like this couldn't be worth my time. I wasn't fighting for what we had built. And of course, for me, I was coming from a deep place of fear because I cared so much. I was holding on to it so tight. I remember, it's funny, I've spoken to him about it, Traver, my buddy. the Uncivilized Nation. I was talking to him, and I honestly can't remember if it was a conversation he and I had had or if it was in a podcast, but I remember hearing from him that when we withdraw like that, it's a form of abuse. And that really stuck with me because if you deny something essential from someone, that's abuse, right? If I deny my children water or food or affection, it's abusive. I hear these stories all the time and it makes me sad of people who withdraw sex as like a punishment for not doing quote unquote the right thing. I'm not talking about people growing apart. It's like you're not getting any until you do that. To me, that's abusive. So when I looked at it, it was like, so what am I doing? I am withdrawing my connection. I'm withholding my love and affection for this woman. I didn't intend it abusively, but that's how it was perceived. Rightly so, I realize now. So when we came together and had this conversation, and she said to me, like, this is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling like you don't care. I'm feeling so sad because you won't even fight for it. I then had the courage to say, well, with tears coming down my face, I am heartbroken that you feel that way. Can I share with you what is going in my mind when we have these disagreements? And I shared with her what I told you, these fears of making it worse, of blowing it out of proportion, of it ending. And of course, I'm going to use the word vulnerability, brought us together. And we kind of laid down ground rules, right? Like if we're upset with each other, I will tell you that I'm upset. I still will probably need time to gather my thoughts. I will still probably need a moment to maybe cool down or realize, is this a big deal? Maybe I'm getting angry because I'm hungry. Maybe I'm getting angry because I haven't processed something that happened at work. Or maybe I'm getting scared or upset because something that I see in my relationship with you is actually mirroring something back on me. That's just something within me that I don't like. But I'm going to tell you how I feel. And if I need to walk away to cool off or to process it, you're going to know that that's why. Not because I don't care, quite the opposite, because I care so much, I need to make sure that I get this as right as possible. I remember exactly where we were sitting when we had that conversation, because that was probably the single most potent inflection point of our entire relationship. Everything changed when we committed to being honest about how we feel, and we paired that with an ironclad commitment that our relationship not only was going to survive, but it was going to thrive. And we also committed to giving each other, quote unquote, permission to share what we're seeing in the other person, provided it is done with love and respect. And that has become such an incredible tool. If I'm being an ass and the kids are wearing me down and I'm just riding them, she has quote unquote permission to say, hey, babe, why don't you back off a little bit? Why don't I step in and deal with this? You're kind of riding them too hard. Or if one of us is in a mood and we can tell we're just kind of chipping at each other, we can say, hey, look, we're clearly about to throw down with each other. I don't know if this is something you're working through or something I'm working through, but can we pause? Can we acknowledge that we're about to have a blowout fight over something silly? Can we either talk about it or can we just acknowledge that let's not do that? Let's talk about what's going on and let's come together. And what we learned through that process was how to overcome this avoidant attachment style that I was bringing to the table. She was pursuing, show me you care, show me you love me, show me that I matter. And I overcame the need to back away, to protect myself, to operate from fear. Fear that I was going to screw it all up. Fear that I was not good enough for this woman and that all it was going to take was one fight and all of it was going to come unraveling. And I knew kind of in my heart that it wasn't true, but fear, man, fear gets under your skin and rots you. And it forces you almost. It forces the wrong word, but it sets the stage for us to make some shockingly dumb decisions. But it was hearing a few things, pieces that I put together, that withholding who you are, your love, your affection, your attention, that's abusive. And that this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, but how might my partner perceive that? Man, I wish that I could have been able to say, how do you feel when I walk away? How do you feel when I withdraw? I'm so grateful that she had the courage to say to me, this is what I feel. I don't feel like you care. I don't feel like you're fighting for us. I've talked before, and I've actually had some people ask me if I can do it again. I've got a process for creating my personal vision of how I would like my life to be. And the one thing that I've said to a lot of people, and it moves a lot of people, it moves me often to tears, is that the vision of my relationship with my wife, which is complex and volatile and loving and caring and tender, and we have challenges just like everybody else, but my vision is of her and I being in our 90s, holding hands, sitting on a park bench, maybe watching our grandkids, being that model for people when people say, like, how do you do it right? Do it like Joshua and Kate. And knowing that I'm going to walk that path with her forever is what gives me the courage to be open and honest with her. There are things that woman knows about me that not another soul on this planet knows. And I can't tell you how marvelous it is to know that if I need to say something to her, if I need to get something off my chest, that she is absolutely my safe harbor 100% of the time. It's not to say I download everything to her. It's not to say that I put all that on her. But for that heavy stuff, the deep-seated fears and insecurities that we all carry around, there's nothing that I wouldn't be able to tell her. But it started with my avoidant attachment style, fear of engagement, the kind of messed up utopian view that good relationships don't have arguments, good relationships don't have conflict. Ironically, because I was raised in such a loving and caring home. Like, talk about how can you as a parent get it right? Like, they did just about everything right. And what was one of the main takeaways for me? Hide my discontent, hide my frustration, hide my fears, because good relationships clearly don't have conflict. That's why if we have a disagreement, obviously depending on the nature of what we're talking about, but like we let our kids see us have a disagreement. We share them. Mom and I don't agree with something right now. We're having a conversation. Sometimes they get a little heated. We're not a yelling kind of family, but we have these heated conversations or we have negotiations or debates at the table. God, politics or whatever. But we articulate to them. We don't agree right now. We're not really happy necessarily with each other right now, but that's okay. We love each other. At the end of the day, this thing that we have, this family, is more important than any of that stuff. And I want them to see us disagree. I want them to see us disagree with respect and kindness. And then I want them to see us kiss and make up. Drives my kids crazy. Ugh, they're kissing. I need them to see that. It's a natural part of these relationships. But if you're the kind of guy who withdraws, if you're the kind of guy who goes to ground when things get hard, I get it. I need you to know I get it. But you have to work through it. You have to have the courage to explore. Why do I do that? What am I really afraid of? Maybe you don't actually care, but I'm guessing if you're the kind of person who's listening to this podcast or who's doing the kind of work that we do, you care. And then how do you bridge that gap to reconnect with the people that matter to you? It's so important that whatever you want to build, whatever you want to accomplish in life, you have to start at the core. And the core are those deep, intimate relationships that you have with the people that matter most, your spouse, your kids, your immediate family. But especially with your spouse. Have you ever had that day where like you have a disagreement with your wife and the whole day is messed up? The whole rhythm, the whole energy is off. Because when you have a good, strong relationship, you know that the person you fall back to, the person that has your back, the person that gets you when no one else will get you is your wife or husband. You know that that's where you can go. So when you are in conflict with them, not only are you experiencing conflict, you've lost that safe harbor, hopefully only temporarily. It is so disruptive. Anything else that you want to build is impacted by the quality of those powerful, intimate relationships that you have. Nothing is more important than getting your house in order so that you can then go out and conquer whatever the world is for you that you want to conquer. There are other attachment styles, there's other things that can come into play if you're in conflict or if your relationship isn't as strong or as potent as you'd like it to be. The path through that is probably therapy, couples therapy, possibly individual to figure out what's going on. But a lot of the work that we do in coaching is actually how to show up in a relationship, how to reconnect in such a way that the people that matter most to you know that they matter most to you and that your words mirror, or pardon me, that your actions mirror your words and your thoughts, especially if you're like me and you keep those thoughts to yourself. I was sitting at a men's event. I think I was in Nashville several years ago. And the guy was giving a presentation on relationships. And to be honest, most of the presentation was a blur. I was actually supposed to present next, but I was sitting in the back and he said something that I'll never forget. He said most relationships don't fail over one big catastrophic event. Sure, there's infidelity, there's things like that, but actually, relationships can survive those things. Usually, what is the downfall of a relationship is hundreds of little actions, little pieces of neglect, little conflicts, little withdrawals, little pieces of animosity and resentment that we allow to fester. Thousands of little moves that slowly move us towards the edge, so slowly it's imperceptible. And then one day it's just this little thing, and we fall right off the edge. And we didn't see it coming. I often say to my clients, before every scream is an inhale, or before every yell, there's a whisper. We have to start paying attention to that inhale before someone screams. We have to pay attention to those little moments. And then we have to have the courage to do something about it. The relationship can't mean anything if you don't yet have the courage to go after it. Prove it. Your actions are what matters. So if you withdraw, gentlemen, please recognize it for what it is. It does not accomplish what you think it does. It just creates this massive wedge between you and your partner. Address it head on, confront it, open your heart, share what you're feeling, and come together. If you're not sure how to do that, reach out. Our men's group can handle it. Coaching can handle it if you're in Ontario. Therapy. There's lots of paths that we can take to help you work through these things. But please do not neglect your relationship by withdrawing repeatedly. There's a reason why you're doing it, but that's not an excuse. It's just a reason, and it is your responsibility to overcome it. I appreciate you all. Have a good day.